Do you have a feeling of dread when heading to a networking or corporate event? Do you avoid going to the kitchen pantry in the office because you don't want to have an accidental run-in with someone and have to make chit-chat? Do you feel drained because you have to be on all day while you're at work? If you've felt these things, then like me, you're probably an introvert. We very much live in a society which equates leadership, success, and ambition with extroversion. We're told it's all about who you know and not what you know. And it's not uncommon to see someone with less technical expertise or experience that you do progress further and faster in their career because they've been able to positively harness their extroversion to build their network and reputation. Meanwhile, us extroverts who aren't quite as vocal or present are just hoping that our hard work will eventually get recognized. While this might seem unfair, it's important to remember that as humans, we are social creatures, and we heavily rely on socialization and communication. The system isn't rigged against introverts. It's just that extroverts have an inherent advantage with their comfortability in this environment. Socialization in the work setting is necessary to some extent to build social coherence and to help develop a sense of community, which is all really important when it's something that we do day in and day out. I've worked in corporate law firms for over 5 years now, and as an introvert myself, I've really changed my approach from how I initially started to now. While I'm definitely far from being some charismatic networking guru or the guy that just knows everybody, I've worked out a few things that have helped me out throughout the years that I'm hoping to pass along to my fellow introverts. Before we dive in, I think it's helpful to define what it means to be an introvert. Being an introvert doesn't necessarily mean you're socially awkward or really hate public speaking. The best way I've seen it explained is that introverts recharge while on their own and spend this energy during socialization, while extroverts get energy while socializing and have a lower tolerance for spending time alone. But in reality, like anything, it's not quite this binary. You aren't just simply extroverted or introverted. It most definitely is a spectrum, and you as an individual might actually shift on this spectrum over the course of time. I think for me, if you were to meet me in person at a party or a work event, you wouldn't necessarily feel that I was an introvert, but I know that for me personally, social interactions, specifically ones that are not with my close friends, can be extremely draining. I often describe it as having to be on all day while at work, thinking about potential interactions I'm going to have, and overthinking what I want to say, and of course that completely exhausts me. But there are things that you can do to alleviate that feeling. The first tip is to create your own space at work. It's pretty simple. If you have an office, you can just close the door. But obviously in the modern working environment with open plans and sometimes not even having allocated seats, you don't have your own physical space, which can be sort of stressful to introverts. So you do need to actively find this elsewhere. And you can find this by going for a walk on your own and just having that space alone to decompress, or finding a quiet space within the office, whether it's an empty meeting room or even the bathroom. As embarrassing as it is to say, I've definitely just gone to the bathroom, just sat on the toilet lid and just been alone for a bit just to get away from things and just to decompress. But of course, it's important to remember that you do need to balance this. If you have an office, you can't just leave your office door closed all day long. If you're going to the bathroom to get some space, you can't just hide in there for hours at a time. You need to remember that the purpose of getting that space back to yourself is to find that space to recharge so that ultimately you have the energy to socialize. The next tip would be to prepare. I know it's weird to say that you should prepare for social interactions or just normal conversations, but I don't mean just fully scripting out what's going to happen. I think thinking ahead about conversations that you might have helps to settle the nerves a little bit. As introverts, we don't love small talk, but it is part of everyday life and it's something that we all have to do. So it's important for you to feel comfortable and have some questions ready to go for those short interactions or bump-ins. This can be something really simple, just being ready to ask people about how their weekend was or asking them about how their work is going, just so that you have a jumping off point to get some sort of conversation flowing and you're not just standing there awkwardly. And then you should also think about responses to those common questions as well. Have a think about what you did on the weekend. Have a think about, how your work is doing, what you want to say. It's much better to respond with a bit more insight into you as a person rather than just responding with a fine or an okay or a not bad. And for bigger and more daunting social events that will include longer interactions, it's also really helpful to look up who's going to be there and have a think about what topics would be interesting to bring up with people there, and even asking specific questions that you know that those people would engage in. Just doing this little bit of groundwork can really do a lot to put you at ease. And I think on top of all this, it's really important to understand the benefits of socializing. Yes, to us, it might be tiring, it might be draining, but meeting new people and hearing new ideas is extremely refreshing, and it's really healthy. It's a good shift away from a lot of the internalization that we have. And by putting yourself out there more, you're opening yourself up to more potential opportunities and also different people that you might get along very well with. It's very easy just to tell yourself that everyone's being phony, everyone's just doing small talk and they just talk about work, it's so boring. Honestly, if you really just put yourself out there and commit, I think you'll surprise yourself. Try not to moan and groan about having to go to work events and viewing it as some sort of chore and as a negative, because that will just make it so much harder to force yourself to do it. Try to really understand and appreciate the benefits that it gives you, and try to shift the way you think about networking and socializing at work into a more positive light. And a way for you to sort of shift this mindset is just to say yes to things. Just say yes to participate to things, even if they make you uncomfortable. Especially if they make you uncomfortable. Say yes when someone tries to introduce you to someone. Say yes when someone asks if they can get a coffee with you. Look, you don't have to be the one putting your hand up to do any of these things or organize any of these things. But when people invite you to things, your default answer should just be yes. And the more you do this, the more you'll start to feel comfortable in those situations. And who knows, one day you might be brave enough to actually initiate it. And the last tip, which I think is the most valuable, and it's not something that I actively did, but it just sort of happened to me, is to make friends with extroverts. Introverts, we tend to not like huge groups of people, and we're typically more comfortable talking to people one-on-one or just in smaller groups. So leverage this. Invest and build genuine connections and relationships one-on-one with other people. And by having those strong connections and relationships, the people that are extroverts will open their network to you. At parties, they'll know people and help make introductions that you may have been uncomfortable to jump into alone. They're probably a bit more involved in extracurricular activities and can help loop you in. And of course, if you have a strong relationship with these people, then they can wholeheartedly recommend you or refer you to someone. I think that the biggest mistake that an introvert can do in the workplace is to try and act like an extrovert. In the long run, it's just not going to help you. It will just make you feel like you can't be yourself and that you need to put on some sort of mask just to exist at work. It is so important to be yourself, especially at work where you're there for long hours and it's such a big part of your life. Yes, you do want to push yourself out of your comfort zone at times, but you shouldn't have to become something that you aren't. And you won't be able to sustain it, and it will eventually catch up to you. I have struggled, and I still struggle at corporate networking events. But I've come a long way from being that person that just stood next to the one person they knew in the room, was just eating food by themselves, and would leave early because they felt awkward. It's so interesting because when I think about it, even though, I've gone to so many social events, so many corporate events now, but I always still have a level of dread or anxiety before I go to these things. And I really need to gas myself up before I go. But once I'm there and I'm chatting to people, it's completely fine and things just keep moving. And it's just odd because although I know it's fine and it's happened so many times and the result is the same, I still get that feeling. But I've learned just to throw myself into it and not to stand at the edge of the board and looking at how high the jump is. You just need to jump. And then you'll realize it's not as scary as you built it all up to be, and it's actually sort of fun. So don't leave your door closed all day long. Don't pretend you're messaging someone on your phone when you're at a social event. And don't tell people you're busy when you're not. Say yes to things. Go up to someone that you haven't met before and strike up a conversation. Volunteer for something. As you do these things more and more, you'll build that confidence and you'll become more comfortable. And little by little, you'll feel less like you have to be on while you're at work. And you'll be able to find yourself being able to slip into these situations that you previously dreaded and actually enjoy them. One last thing I did want to say was to try not to box yourself into the definition of an introvert or an extrovert. The words are there to help us better understand the way we feel and why we feel a certain way. and to be able to express and share that with others. But don't use it as a crutch. Don't tell yourself you can't do something because you're an introvert, or don't tell yourself that you should be doing something because you're an introvert. For me, understanding what situations I found drained my energy and what situations I found recharged me, and that I was an introvert in that sense was really important. But I think more importantly is that the whole purpose of recharging is to ultimately socialize. So it's counterproductive just to say you're an introvert and accept that you should be isolating yourself. We are all social creatures, even introverts, and we have so much to gain from social interaction. Like I said before, it helps you come out of your own internalization. It helps you develop and grow new ideas. And when you are talking about topics that excite you with people that you enjoy their company, socialization isn't a chore. Anyways, hopefully that all made sense. If you want to find out more about what life is really like as a corporate lawyer, go ahead and click this video right here. As always, thanks again. Bye.